Besnowed by John Michael Bauer. Chapter 5. Mulled Memories. The frosty fog and its currents swept me into the past, destiny flowing in the wrong direction as thoughts took shape and visions took form. That time way back when. A memory and a dream. The details as hazy as the weather outside. Until it's not, and I'm there. We are there, and I can remember it all. I'll always think of it with a soft fondness. Meeting up with my oldest sister Makoti on that fateful day so many winters ago. This was one of those times after I had only recently moved to Veranum, when coming home was expected and not an event, when me and Lumi weren't officially together but clearly had eyes for each other. We would say our goodbyes on the platform or inside the station, classmates and friendships lingering on in the unsaid syllables as the weight of our emotions carried warmth into our hearts. Neither knew who should make the first move. Neither dared pronounce the words. We simply left the unspoken desire rest uneasy in the air every time we said goodbye. My head would always be stuck on Lumi and her smile as I made my way home, to see my family and enjoy a weekend of home-cooked meals or a longer break filled with family feasts. Everyone was still so used to me just always showing up back then. There was little fanfare at my arrival and greater expectation of my participation. It was only as the gap between visits grew into a wider and deeper abyss that a welcome party was deemed a worthy greeting. Even that waxes and wanes as the years pass into decades. This time was a return to greater bombast and pomp. The extra few years walled away surely made the news of our arrival turn into a local event, at least for our families. During those first few years when my attendance was all but guaranteed, if there was anyone who would go out of their way to form their own welcome party of one, it was my oldest sister Makoti. She always took on the responsibility and the burden of being there for her siblings, a willing counterweight to the overbearing opinions of Dad and the heavy emotions of Mom. I'm sure she noticed how me and Lumi's goodbyes seemed to take longer and longer each and every time I returned. We thought we weren't obvious. Hell, we didn't know ourselves. But sometimes, that which you don't know is clear to a third party. Makoti would respect my ignorance, though, brushing the blushing under the rug as she started a new conversation against my lovesick eyes. We'd sometimes spend entire afternoons wandering the central square markets as I discussed my lessons and she eagerly listened with her own ideas and opinions. The first tree and its auspicious aura inspiring a deeper, more spiritual connection. Offering a small prayer to the 7 saints would often lead us to spending time in St. Vincent's Church. The priest would be happy to join in the conversation as we took in the warmth of her flame or stopped by one of the lesser shrines. We were also known to end up in the cafeteria on the opposite side of the central square. That was the most common destination when I was particularly absent-minded, head in the clouds as the last images of Lumi faded in my mind. The straight path to the stone building was a nice way to feel welcome home. We could enjoy a slow meal and a hard drink as the topic of the hour spilled onto the counter. The fun was in figuring out how to clean it up as we learned more and more from the other's words. One time in particular, Makoti came to welcome me at Besnowed station with an uncharacteristically large smile. No words needed to be said. I knew there was romance overflowing from her eyes. She poured out the details of the proposal and the ceremony as we walked through the central square, past the first tree and into the cafeteria. So you're a Pori now? When I was younger, I lacked an appreciation for tact and polite gestures. I grew up feeling slightly removed from it all, more often lost in dreams than striking deals with the waking world. An unfortunate consequence of this cloudy approach to common conversation was coming across as rude and crass when really I simply wasn't sure of how else to express my thoughts and my will. Yes, but what's more important is we're in love. Despite my blind eye to the bulk of the emotion, Makoti always knew how to connect with me. She had a way with words and an understanding of my intention that made it easier to be myself. Maybe it's better to say it made me feel like she understood my true self without me needing to explain it in ways that made me uncomfortable. That all quickly begins to swirl in circles of confusing thoughts, so it's best to leave it at a simple idea. We made each other comfortable in who we were, who we are. Yeah, I guess. You guess? I'm happy for you. You sound absolutely thrilled. My oldest sister's sarcasm never came across as condescending. It was our way of acknowledging the holes in my own manner of expression. She was clearly more than happy, though. She was finally living her own dream. There was a time when she planned to study in a similar program to the one I was in, but delays in government funding made all that fall through. She ended up staying in Besnowed and struggled to find a workable career for most of her young adult life. I'm sorry I missed the ceremony, by the way. The only way to break the most improper news is bluntly. For those who are close to us, hiding behind difficult words only serves to further deepen the wound. I understand, Sweffin. Her apology was more than the usual vocabulary. She was deeply hurt by my absence and put on the right face to avoid further pain. Her marriage had the unfortunate happenstance of falling on the same date as one of my most important exams. I suppose there is a world in which I could have repeated a year of my studies, but that would have risked losing access to the study program and my right to live in Verenum. That's a lot of words and excuses to say my reasoning was sound, but the emotions were still hard to deal with. Tell me all about it, then. I turned to face McCody with honest eyes and breathed in the cold air of the central square. St. Vincent's flame ignited a fire in my soul that beckoned a truthful confession. The highest peak on the continent, guiding my light to reach my sister and make her feel like I was there. Thank you, Sweffin. McCody wiped a few tears from her face and shook her head. She nodded a few times and memorized the lines to recite for the new character about to walk on stage. The ceremony took place at St. Vincent's Church, as I'm sure you know. We invited everyone and anyone, filling the pews and the shrines to the brim. There were so many bodies we were actually not worried about the heat for once. The marriage happened in that same church I saw in my dream, the stone walls and giant statue of St. Vincent only matched by the endearing vows and eternal blessing from the priest. There would have been an exchange of vows and a ceremonial church accompanied by a choice of hymns and prayers chosen by the bride and groom. The voice of their love taking to the sky and, as we believe, eventually reaching the top of Mount Vincent and singing out to every corner of the continent. It's said on the most auspicious of days, a prayer may even ride an aurora all the way to each of the 7 saints, granting wishes at every summit along the way. Hello? We were greeted at the door to the cafeteria by a young man. He was clearly enamored by my oldest sister McCody and was trying his best to make a good impression. Ridney Pori, my sister's new husband and the latest addition to our family. I'm Ridney Pori, and, yeah, I got us a table by the fireplace to help with the cold. Oh, you made a reservation? The cafeteria was a large hall in a large building, one of the oldest in the village and one of the least changed from the first settlers. The door was set at an angle against stone steps and a counter extending along the entrance where the staff would greet guests. There was usually something of a buffet spread out on the counter, but it wasn't unheard of to order from a menu or stay for drinks. At the far end of the hall was a large fireplace that used to rely on nothing but the gas shipped in from Verenum. Within my lifetime the fuel shifted to local lumber, but the sentiment was all the same. Warmth against the weather, health from the sun. Well, McCody speaks so much of how great you are, and I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to properly meet. Ridney stumbled over his words as the explanation escorted us to a table by the fireplace. It was rare indeed to reserve a seat at the cafeteria, but not unreasonable if one wanted such prestigious sitting. Ridney was going way above and beyond anything I expected and anything I could appreciate. Your family lives in Block C. Yeah, we came over with the migrants from the reforestation project and have stayed for a few generations now. The central plaza and its surrounding buildings were named after letters of the alphabet. We would call them Block A or Block B or Block C in the case of where Ridney and his family lived. Decent-sized apartments built into the infrastructure of our life in Besnowed. And I'm sure Sweffin is more than grateful for all you've done for him, Ridney. Yeah, thank you, Ridney. Don't mention it. The silence was colder than the air outside as we sat by the fire. I was happy to meet the man my sister loved so much, but something about the formalities of expecting a higher level of comfort led to everything feeling even more uncomfortable. So why this place? I asked the only question I could think of to help thaw the frozen air. We were seated and our orders had arrived. 3 cups of the latest batch of mulled wine, a seasonal special that brought flavors of Frithnik Njun to the table. Well, McCody opened up like a flower. That was the question she was waiting to be asked. Her patience was finally sowing its reward. A few months ago, I was having an afternoon tea here when a dashing gentleman walked through the doors. We were going on a simple first date, but I could tell there was a spark. I knew she was the one. Ridney reached out for Makoti and gently rubbed his fingers along the back of her hand. I recognized the emotion, the way someone's touch can soothe the soul. I felt it on the train with Lumi, yet for some reason I struggled to connect the two feelings then. Oh, stop it, Ridney. It's true. Ridney let his guard down as he beamed in brighter shades of red. We hit it off like magic, and I knew it'd last a lifetime. They wandered into and out of each other's eyes, infinity in an instant as their love embraced the brightest light from St. Vincent's flame. Ridney was not just a good husband to Makoti, he was her best friend. We said as much in our vows, Sweffin. Makoti let her gaze drift back over to me. I was trying my best to balance that polite presence and not interrupting their ongoing love, a delicate exercise that I was ill-equipped to manage. Yeah? Show some interest, please, Sweffin. Makoti, it's not his fault. Ridney came to my defense while still barely knowing who I was. He saw it as a way to show his affection to Makoti. If my oldest sister loved me so, he could show his love to her by mirroring the same. Or at least, that's how I came to understand and appreciate it. Ridney wasn't wrong either. I was lost in my own thoughts of love and didn't quite know how to continually congratulate my sister for hers. Then, as if on cue, Lumi passed by the window outside the cafeteria. Makoti and Ridney both noticed my change in posture and demeanor, no longer slouching in with a bored expression, eyes widened, back straight, looking straight at the girl who always seemed to come home with me on the same train. So, you and Lumi Joa? Makoti grabbed my head and turned it to face her. She was grinning ear to ear as she saw through my denials and vague deception. She knew the truth, though. As bright as a holy light and as clear as her crystal spider's own web, caught in the trap with nothing short of an honest refusal to aid in my feigned rebuttal. Me and who? Oh, he doesn't want us to know. Don't pressure him, Makoti. Ridney softly reached for Makoti's arms and pulled them away from her forceful grip on my head. He understood that some things need to marinate a bit before they can be said to the family. Ridney, he's my brother. I can tease him all I want. I struggled to pay attention to what my sister was saying, my eyes taking a long detour back to the window and resting on Lumi's presence outside. She was playing in the central square with her sister Lynn, picking up some snow and packing it into a snowball. She aimed it at Lynn and threw it with a mighty force and an explosive burst of laughter. She is cute. Ridney smirked as he exchanged glances with Makoti, my own sister resorting to rolling her eyes to the farthest corner of their sockets. Yeah. My words drifted faster than my thoughts as I kept staring out the window. Lumi's parents, Lochu and Tamu, were busy bargaining with one of the vendors in the central square, market tents selling special treats for her welcoming meal, more than likely. So it is true. Makoti started to stand up as she followed my eyes straight to Lumi and her sister in the snow. I would have never predicted what she would do next, but I'm grateful all the same. What? Makoti, just drop it. Let him be. Ridney's protests were met with defiance, and my sister was soon pounding her fist on the glass of the window. She motioned for Lumi to join us in the cafeteria. My face went pale white, then beet red as a rush of heat and emotions flushed through my entire body. I was scared. I was embarrassed. I was lost. I was in love. The answer on Lumi's face was confusion at first. She stood there looking at me through the glass as we both were a bit confused at what we should do. The long seconds, separated by the warmth of the fireplace and the frozen air outside, were interrupted by the wallop of a snowball from her sister. Sibling revenge served cold. That reminds me of me and Brian. Makoti laughed as she thought about the games she played with and tricks she played on my second sister. The jests were in good fun, and the honest, compassionate expression was made clear through the walls of the building. My oldest sister let out another laugh as she made a large gesture for Lumi to come inside and join them. She mouthed out the words and waved her hands wildly until it was understood. The confusion on Lumi's face slowly softened as she pointed to her sister with a question, the answer, of course, being, "Bring her too." So they joined us in the cafeteria. Ridney made sure to get Lumi a new cup of the latest batch of mulled wine with a special order of hot cocoa for Lynn. What followed was a hollow moment as we all sat in an uncomfortable silence, the pleasantries pushed aside and the reality of a relative stranger sitting down with us at the table by the fireplace settling in. You and Sweffin are going to the same school in Verenum? Makoti had a way to calm those quiet storms, navigating the proverbial sea of expectations with the expertise of a veteran captain. In retrospect, I doubt she knew much of what she planned to do or wanted to achieve. The goal was to embarrass me in a silly way and meet a girl I had a crush on. The first half of the mission was well accomplished, as I did my best to hide my face in the steam coming off my cup. Yeah, we just got here a little while ago. We have the same Frithik break, so I guess we ended up on the same train back to Besnowed. My lie was highlighted in the crooked bend of my fingers around my cup, grasping onto the handle to reveal the white of my knuckles. We had long since planned to come home together, but I thought we both thought it would be better to avoid mentioning that detail to our family. Actually, we arranged to come here together. It's better to have company for the ride. Lumi gave me a coy look as the rest of the table decided whether it was safe to laugh or smile. The chill down my spine as I processed the pressure only shifted the color in my face to a brighter shade of red. Swefin, why didn't you just tell us that? Makoti put on her mock disappointment with care. It was more about teasing me than making me feel uncomfortable. Oh, cut it out, Makoti. If he doesn't want his big sister to bother him about his love life, that's okay. Ridney came to my defense by saying something that only dug the hole much, much deeper. Love life? On the Seven Saints, we're just classmates. Lumi choked on the words as her eyes shifted to check on her sister Lynn's reaction. Lynn, for her part, was mostly unaffected by the conversation. She was more focused on the coming celebrations and trying her best to not disrupt the strangers who seemed so interested in Lumi. Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, but there are very few people from Besnowed and Verenum. It's nice to have familiar company over there. I added in some logic to help the reasoning behind my transparent deception. I see. Well, I hope the company is enjoyable then. Makoti let her lips curl into a wry smile as she raised her cup for a toast to the holiday season. To another perfect Frithik shared with those most beloved of souls. We ended up spending hours and hours at the cafeteria that day. That was my first chance to really get to know Ridney, and it was the first chance for Lumi to meet someone from my family. We all warmed up to each other, and the vocabulary soon shifted from polite and stifled to energetic and emotional. Take the first tree, for example. Lumi was on her fourth or fifth shared cup of the mulled wine as she waved her pointed finger out the window toward the center of the public square. Her sister Lynn already left to join her parents back at their home in the oval-shaped house on the hill. What about it? Makoti asked the follow-up question as her own words began to slur. We were breaching one of those sacred seals, and it seemed everyone was along for the ride. What function does it serve? Lumi's question bordered on the blasphemous, but it was intriguing all the same. Such an intrinsically important aspect of our life and our culture was not something often brought under the scrutiny of such a bright light. It's a symbol of St. Vincent and her devotion to our people. I gave the respected and expected answer, the unsatisfying script that revealed nothing more than how good my memory of old school lessons was. No, I don't mean that. I mean in a more practical sense. How does a crystal tree help Besnowed survive the cold? Lumi was swirling her cup with little splashes of wine washing onto the tabletop. We all focused on the drips and drops to avoid an answer as a blanket of silence dampened the light of embers in the fireplace dancing through the room. Well, it's art, isn't it? Ridney was the first to provide a more honest answer to the question, a new direction in the otherwise intensely vague idea. I'm not sure whether we realized it or not, but we were all lazily wandering around the core of the crux, the eternal paradox of solving the almighty infinite, everyday practicality solved with a single simple equation. So what's the point of art? Lumi asked bluntly to the shock of all the eyes around the table. Holy truth and divine unity in a dismissed and divisive manner. Our impassioned desire on an unfamiliar summit, so we stayed silent again. No answer found in the orange glow of the fireplace or the white flakes falling outside. None but she may think for thee. The easy way out was in the repeated recitations. St. Vincent's eternal blessing and the protection her flame avows. She is sworn to forever protect our people. Lumi was searching for another level of abstraction, something further down the line and deeper down the hole. Besnowed was not a place you would think cares for the distraction of art. Stone structures built on stilts to survive the permafrost and extend the ongoing experiments of a powerful and wealthy nation, and yet it was important. She was of such an integral significance that her ceremonious presence demanded a place on our town's center stage. It's an expression of expression. Ridney stuttered between sips as his lips stumbled between syllables. He let his cup settle on the tabletop and let the words fall into a more proper order. The first tree, all these frithlic neon decorations, it's all a part of that same feeling. We aren't just wild animals finding shelter, or more than that. We have to be. The only way we know how is with an expression of what makes us who we are. How she makes us who we are. She blesses us with art. Okay, but what does the first tree mean, as art, to you? Lumi looked into Ridney's eyes, looking for more answers. My Lumi could be soft and intense at the same time like that. Curious and interested on all manner of subject, whether or not it fell within her usual comforts or not. That's a good question. Ridney paused to consider the idea and give an honest answer. Any doubts or worries that were once present had long since passed. The first impressions were settled and we were comfortable in those seats and roles. The memory would be lasting as we dived into that exploration of who we really were and what values truly matter in the most abstract of senses. My sister Makoti surely thought some of it was influenced by our time in the city, new experiences leading the young lovers to question the life they once knew. In some families and with some people, that would turn into a sarcastic or cynical dismissal. But Makoti looked on with honest eyes, listening to our thoughts with interest and care. What do you think, Sweffen? My sister shifted the focus onto me with just a few words, cups raised to allow for more time to answer, a notable silence as thoughts gathered into a steady storm. I had specific opinions on these ideas, art in its place among the broken backs of pragmatics. I was also less confident and less than sure about how to express them. It doesn't need to mean anything for it to be important to people. My crude draft flooded over the rising steam of the freshly poured round of mulled wine. Everyone has their own take on what the first tree means, right? It's a symbol to the seven saints, a beacon for St. Vincent. Her flame has always warmed Besnowed in a very real sense. You mean the altar in St. Vincent's church? Makoti pressed the subject further. No, well, yeah, sure, but no. The jumbled mess of thoughts and prayers were placing predicates without precedence. I needed to take a breath and get the story straight, or I'd be lost in a muddied confusion that at best made me look lost. I mean the art, the first tree, the decorations, the statue, and even the altar. All the symbols, right? By having such a prominent symbol in the center of town, she's the center of our life. St. Vincent keeps us warm with that piece of art. The steam settled on the cold counter as we all stopped to watch the snow, the crystal icicles reflecting the dimming twilight sky. A church in all but name as our deepest wishes flashed before our eyes. Yeah, you're not wrong, but I was thinking about it a bit different. About how it compares to how everything is in Verenum. You've noticed, haven't you, Sweffen? Lumi surprised me with a return to reality. My hometown of Besnowed and the first tree at the center of our village seemed as far away as possible from any idea of an example in Verenum City. What do you mean? Makoti raised the next question and turned to focus on Lumi's words. She once dreamed of moving to Verenum herself and was intensely aware of the missed opportunity. The unfortunate missteps of a lost life and the serendipitous luck of finding love may have once led to a confusing mix of emotions, but she was confident in how everything ended up now. But the bright light of that dream still sparkled in her eye. Well, Verenum likes to think of itself as a springtime city, and that's sometimes hard to imagine against the backdrop of our climate and the masonry architecture. Cold temperatures and high stone walls reaching for the heavens. You could even say the city center and its tallest spires aim to rise higher than Mount Vincent. Lumi wasn't wrong in her description. Verenum was like a portal into this world of contradictions. The government put so much money into projects meant to mold the world into a paradise. It still seemed a bit disconnected from the subject at hand. I wasn't sure how Lumi meant to connect the first tree and its symbolism to the design of the largest city on the continent. That doesn't sound so different to what we have here. Ridney pointed around at the buildings surrounding the central square, letting his finger rest on St. Vincent's Church, drawing the straight line between its massive doors and the first tree. I'm sure it's an order of magnitude more impressive in Verenum, Ridney, Makoti answered. I don't know. I find Besnowed's central square plenty beautiful. Maybe not springtime, but we appreciate the art. That means more to me than having something designed around ideas that are supposed to mean more. It's enough for it to mean something to us. Ridney looked to Makode for approval of his appraisal. He wasn't wrong, and he was honest in his expressions, but there was much more to the city than I think the village could really ever understand. You're right, Ridney. I answered this time. I wanted to share my own misconceptions of Verenum, the surprise in my eyes as I first arrived and the shock I still felt wandering the streets. But it's not quite like that in Verenum. I thought it would never be much more than a grander vision of what we have here, but it's not. The attention to the aesthetic in every stone is almost immaculate. They plan the streets and the tunnels and the parks and the districts. Everything flows to the other and rises up in layers. We think the first tree is impressive, but they have a park near where we live with a crystal tree forest. That just sounds like a more expensive version of what we know here. Ridney continued to defend his position. Not in defiance, but in curiosity and a willingness to understand. The ideas of beauty and aesthetics against pragmatics and utility. It's really not, though, especially not for people who are from there or have adopted the city as their home. My defense was weak, but it was all I could offer to someone whose eyes had yet to see the full glory of Verenum. And it was glorious, in that vaguely religious sense. When me and Lumi first arrived on that train, we held hands and each other close as the stone walls came into view. We were scared and we were in awe. It was magnificent and it was massive. Our eyes got lost following the towers as they climbed higher into the sky, past the clouds and reaching for the moon. I don't think I would have been able to believe it was real if not for having Lumi so close. She grounded me and I grounded her as we realized the new world and new life before us. The stone walls pushed right up the coast and opened up to a view of the sea, an infinite horizon we only knew from books and dreams. The air so cold it froze our thoughts as the train took the last turn into the city and set the air ablaze. Warmth and lights in every corner and every abyss. Comfort and protection with strong stones and a large population. There was more activity at the train station than an entire year in Besnowed. It was overwhelming. That such a place could exist on the same continent, in the same world. It didn't feel real. Me and Lumi held on to each other to remind ourselves of home and remind ourselves that this was our new reality. The fast pace of the city currents didn't give us much time to adjust as we were soon swept up into the new schedules and schoolwork. In a few short months, the once impossible sights of cliffs and stone walls climbing to Disney heights felt normal and usual. Well then, how am I supposed to understand or appreciate it? Should I just feel bad for living here in Besnowed? Ridney turned his gaze back to me as his question sunk in. An honest half of me believed what he was saying to be the unfortunate answer he needed or wanted to hear. But that wasn't fair. I don't think Sweffen means to make us feel like we're missing out. Makode calmed the sea with her voice. I'm sure Makode knew that Ridney was speaking on behalf of his lover's own doubts and regrets. I just think it's pretty. Lumi lightened the mood a touch further with a new interpretation, and we finally let out a laugh. I nodded in a quiet approval to Ridney. He was right, both in his calling me out for verging on the condescending and for correctly understanding my accidental intentions. He replied by calling over another toast and another round of mulled wine. Me too, Lumi. Makode reached out for Lumi's arm before preparing her words and unlifting her cup. We had a few more discussions around similarly heavy topics, but the mood was always light. We felt safe and comfortable sharing even unorganized emotions that afternoon. I learned how Ridney was an aspiring chef of sorts and how him and Makode were planning to get one of the new wooden cottages near my parents' place. Since then, the story has become one of those things Makode repeats if there's ever a lull in a dinner conversation. The rest of the family plays their part in remembering how drunk we were by the time we made it home. But there really was something sweet about the memory, even if everyone is tired of hearing it. A love story that matched the special batch of mulled wine. I would bet Ridney was trying to recreate it, finding a subtle way to remind my sister of the story without forcing the entire family to listen to it yet again. That's how my family tends to feel. More emotions than years to bear or the wisdom to properly process. Regardless of the tired tales, we all really love each other. Hurtful words may sting and delayed apologies may grow into longer regrets, but that doesn't change who we are to each other. All that matters is that indescribable connection. It's all that ever will. It took me leaving home and learning to love Lumi to figure all that out. I often wonder if my kids will struggle in the same way. Time will tell that cruel joke, I'm sure, when it's my turn to say goodbye and see them off to make their own future and family. For now, every meal we share helps us grow to love each other more in the moments between each bite. A lifetime of winters spent being who we really are without judgment or expectation. Laughing through all the silliness we once thought was worth arguing about. Fights over who got the best nest or the pain of being tricked into doing all the chores. The details matter so much less as time marches on. Perspective in the aggregate and protection from the cold and the familiar feelings of each other. I can understand now what was most important was simply being there, together.